The letter of Jude is a fantastic and yet very often forgotten letter in the New Testament. It's one of the shortest, but it packs a punch. And it is really important to grasp its message and to understand what Jude is saying. I think he manages to combine both a realism about the threats that exist within and without the church, and a real sense of assurance and encouragement about what it means to be a Christian. And you get that sense of encouragement from the way he uses the little word kept and keep. So Jesus has kept us, and we are to keep ourselves in the faith. So there's this dual keeping that you find in the letter. And that overshadows, that is the umbrella for understanding the Christian life. But in the midst of this encouragement, the threats are real, and you have a list of Old Testament and other examples of false teachers who have caused God's people to fall into error and sinful living. Jude introduces himself at the beginning of the letter, and he describes himself as a servant of Jesus Christ and a brother of James. Well, that's very striking, because that suggests not only is he a servant of Jesus Christ, he's also his biological brother. So that gives him great status potentially in the church, but he still sees himself as one who serves Jesus as his Christ, as his king. And this letter would have been written in the first 30 or so years of the early church. He had great respect and authority in writing this because, obviously, of his connections and his godly leadership. People raise a couple of objections to the letter of Jude, and they're concerned about them, and so I just want to touch on them. The first is the fact that in relating these different precedents, these stories of people's effect on God's people in the past, Jude includes one or two examples taken from outside the Old Testament scriptures, the Jewish scriptures. And they wonder what on earth Jude is doing. Well, I don't think this is a particular concern, not least because these were stories that were in circulation in Jesus' time, certainly the years before that. Jewish believers would have known them, and that's presumably why Jude refers to them. And in some ways, it's no different from anyone in a sermon, perhaps today, drawing on great precedents from church history. They're not necessarily scriptural, and yet they're there to inspire or to warn. And so I think that's exactly what Jude is doing here. But the thing that is perhaps a little bit of a concern, more of a concern, is the fact that there is a striking similarity between Jude and the second letter of Peter. Indeed, some of the illustrations are the same. The structure seems very similar, as well as the purpose. But again, I don't think there is huge cause for alarm here. We know that various letters, documents written by the apostles and senior leaders in the early church were distributed. We know that happened to Paul's letters. And so it's no surprise that Jude and Peter and many others would have had sight of each other's writings. And so whichever one comes first, and we can't necessarily know which whichever one comes first, there's no problem about them using and appropriating some other people's materials. In fact, preachers do that all the time, don't they? And so the fact that we have both, actually, with their slight differences in focus and certainly difference in length, just adds to the richness of what the scriptures contain for us.